It's getting more expensive if you look at it through the lens of fiat, but things are getting less expensive if you look at them through the lens of Bitcoin, or if you measure their value with a fixed unit. So yeah, the world is getting better. It just depends on where your focus is. And so things are getting worse in the fiat paradigm and clown world. So things are getting better if you live on a Bitcoin standard and you're paying attention to what's happening to Bitcoin. And I think that a bunch of corrupted, sociopathic, diabolical, evil overlords will continue to implement their scumbaggery and try to do the things that they've done to effectively corrupt systems in the past. But they will run to an impermeable wall of truth, and that is Bitcoin. Bitcoin changes you because you cannot change Bitcoin. It inverts the incentive structure. You now have a first mover advantage over, the traditional financial whales, as you could put it. Yeah, and on that note too, I actually, when people, discuss hyper Bitcoinization, I believe it's happening. I think we're in it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's subjective. Depends on
Do you
your
want to see what it says on my back? Look at this quote.
Yeah, what do you got? Yes, I love that. That's real good.
The possibility to be anonymous or pseudonymous relies on you not revealing any identity information about yourself in connection with the Bitcoin address you use. Satoshi Nakamoto. Welcome to What is Your Bitcoin Story podcast, where we dive into the fascinating journey and experiences of individuals in the Bitcoin community. I'm your host, Gigi, and today we have an incredible guest joining us, Eric V. Stacks. Eric is a passionate advocate for Bitcoin and a cannabis farmer with a bright outlook on the long-term potential of this revolutionary technology. In this episode, we'll explore Eric's path to Bitcoin, his insights on its implications for the future, and the intersection of Bitcoin and cannabis in his life. So sit back, relax, and let's get the show rolling. Eric, welcome to the show.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Amazing. Well, thank you for taking the time on. It's a pleasure. I've been waiting quite some time to have you on. I've been following your very inspiring journey for the past 12 months. And then I was fortunate enough to actually meet you in person at BTC Prague, which was great. And here we are today sitting down to have a one-on-one chat and kind of go a little bit into the backstory and see where does your Bitcoin rabbit hole journey begin. So I guess we can kick it off from there.
Sounds good. So you want to hear how I got into Bitcoin, how I discovered Bitcoin?
Yeah. How did your Bitcoin journey begin?
Yeah. So I was sitting on a property that I just purchased in 2016. I closed escrow on a parcel, 2 properties actually, 10 acres in a house and 7 acres adjacent. The reason that I purchased the property was to go through the permit process with the county, ultimately to get licensed by the state of California to produce cannabis. When I closed escrow, it was the first property that I had purchased, and I was all in. I had spent all my money to buy this property. It was an enormous financial outlay for me, and so that kicked off a real need for me to understand the boom bust cycles in the economy and real estate specifically. So I started to go down the economic rabbit hole, and I spent 9 months, studying the history of markets, the boom bust cycles. I was like 20 years old, 21 or so when the great financial crisis hit in 2008 or 9. So I wasn't quite old enough to know exactly what was happening. So anyways, I learned about the Federal Reserve, how we detached from gold in 1971. The money printing that led me to understand, the value of having a hard money, Austrian economics versus Keynesian economics. And then I discovered Bitcoin, and I was very well primed to understand the magnitude of an ultimately truly scarce monetary instrument, due to the fact that I was a commodity producer, watching the value of the product that I was producing decline quite rapidly. So I knew intuitively that if there's more demand for anything, that the supply will then increase. And I was watching that happen with the dollar and the United States currency. The world reserve currency is the demand for because money has infinite demand on it, because it's a call option on any good or service that the marketplace can produce. It's the only thing that everybody wants an infinite amount of. So if you could couple infinite demand with true scarcity, you're going to have the apex monetary instrument, or the apex asset, as Michael Saylor would say. So after 9 months of studying money and economics, discovering Bitcoin, it blew my mind. And actually, it was a catalyst for me to change my life strategy, because I realized through the lens of Bitcoin that I had an existential crisis, that this dream come true scenario for me, in getting permitted and licensed, which I did do in record times, which was a series of miracles. But that was a problem, because it was going to lead to me owning this business where I was fixed with all of these regulatory fees, high taxes, and the value of the product was most certainly going to continue to decline. As Jeff Booth says, all prices fall to the marginal cost of production. So as the supply was most certainly going to increase, I knew that the value of the product that I was going to be producing was going to decrease. So I decided that I was going to sell my property, and I did. It took me a year to get permitted and a year to then sell the property. So I owned the property for 2 years, farmed it for 2 seasons, ended up getting fully permitted, fully licensed, and then sold the property, and then put those proceeds into Bitcoin. And I'm very happy that I did. Yes.
Amazing. So I guess, what was that point? Did you come across Bitcoin yourself, or did someone refer it to you, or what was that kind of first instinct point with Bitcoin? Or you watched some YouTube video and you were like,
So I was watching a lot of YouTube videos about money and, economics and, hard money. And then I did have a friend that mentioned Bitcoin to me. They seem to have an affinity for it. This was in December. I was privy to its existence, but not being a very tech savvy individual, I didn't put much thought into it until someone had brought it up to me. And like I said, everything was in place. Like I had just spent 8 months doing like pretty, nonstop. Like I'm a farmer, so I have the luxury of like going around while I'm doing my daily activities, listening to YouTube videos. So I have my phone in my pocket, headphones in, just devouring as much information as possible. So yeah, somebody definitely brought it up to me. They had an affinity for it, thought it could be a big deal. I watched a few YouTube videos. Within a few days, I was absolutely
hooked.
Elated. Yes.
Amazing. It sounds it's like a common theme. Once someone does a little bit of digging in and spends a couple of hours reading about Bitcoin, they're like, holy shit, there's a lot more to this than just internet money. And no matter how much time you spend studying, even Guy Swan, that's read more than anyone else in the world about Bitcoin, he's still like discovering new things every day, and that's the best part. I mean, if we just zoom out, like I mentioned to a lot of guests on this pod, like Bitcoin's only been around for 15 years, and what it's been able to achieve in such a short time span, it's fascinating. And where we go in the future, I don't like putting that question, where do you see Bitcoin or yourself in 5, 10, 15 years? Who knows? I just think it's going to go exponential from here, because if no government, no institution was able to stop it by now, and now they've officially given into the race now with the whole ETFs, even though I'm not a big fan of them, but they're kind of, they legitimized it, and now everybody's jumping on the bandwagon, which is nice, that the big Wall Street boys are getting in late to the game, which is kind of the opposite of the usual financial instruments, where usually the big boys get it cheap, and then the retail kind of, gets the other end of the stick. Here, it's kind of Satoshi spin the tables on them.
He did, yeah. You now have a first mover advantage over, the traditional financial whales, as you could put it. Yeah, and on that note too, I actually, when people, discuss hyper Bitcoinization, I believe it's happening. I think we're in it. And I think that that's subjective. Depends on
Do
your
you want to see what it says on my back? Look at this quote.
Yeah, what do you got? Yes, I love that. That's real good. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's happening. The fact that we've gotten this far in 15 years is a testament to a lot of things. How badly we needed it. I love one of the things that I love a lot of the things that Michael Saylor says, but one of the things that comes to mind is all of these other assets or monetary instruments, things that we use to store our economic energy in, they're all defective. They're all leaking energy. They have maintenance costs, they have ownership costs, they have management costs. They're being diluted, debased, siphoned off of. And so, yeah, I think a lot of the problems in our world stem from not having an effective way to store your value, and the incentives get all skewed. So yeah, I just think it's we really needed Bitcoin. It hit our reality at a time when we needed it the most, seemingly so.
100%. And just to add to what you said there, Eric, one more super important factor is the unconfiscatability aspect of it, because governments and tyrants were always, if you didn't go by the book and didn't follow the rules, they come in and confiscate it. May it be your house, may it be your gold, bars under the mattress, whatever it is. But with Bitcoin, it's first time in history that nobody can confiscate it. Maybe, they could get through to your seed phrase, but hopefully you've done a semi-decent good job to hide it somewhere else and you don't keep it in your household. But it's just insane, how they could essentially see all this wealth that you own, but they can't touch it, which is it's a powerful meme.
Yeah, and that changes a lot of things about our world. I think since the beginning of time, we've had a problem with having to protect our stuff due to the physicality of property. Everything that we've been using to store our energy in has been physical. Even in the digital world, they've been centralized entities controlling the digital instruments that have been monetized. And so it's been a game of trying to prevent your stuff from being stolen from you, whether it's your own government or another warring nation or a nation that you could potentially have conflict with. Yeah, you can see people's stuff. Real estate. If you have a bunch of real estate, everybody can look at your property, your building. They can see it. And then now you got to get political to make sure that, politicians or people don't start to vote your property away from you. And so it solves a problem. I think it solves a problem for everybody, even more so the elites, I would say. I think a lot of the issues in the world stem from the fact that you have the most wealthy people in the world have the issue of trying to prevent their stuff from being taken from them. So this is a monumental solution. I kind of think about it from a more spiritual and metaphysical sense, as like the merging of the physical and the metaphysical world, or as Sailor would say, Satoshi paired or lit a fire in cyberspace, found matter in cyberspace. As far as I can tell, cyberspace is just the land beyond this ethereal realm, the invisible realm beyond, but is here with us. And so being able to, access that and have a finite monetary instrument in that realm that's unconfiscatable, inviolable, that's a monumentally big deal. And I think it changes most things about how we operate in our civilization today.
And more than that, like Bitcoin really, it's like the truth teller of everything. It brings up that most things that you were taught in life, even from the teachers, even to a certain extent your parents, because they went through the whole brainwashing cycle that everyone has, that everything was essentially not as it is, right? Because there's always hidden agendas and hidden truths behind everything that's being told to us, and we're programmed not to question stuff. I remember going to business school, and it was all about, don't bring up your own theory. We have the Keynesian model, and that's how the world operates. And I never understood this 10-year boom bust cycle. I was like, that just doesn't make sense to me. And I was always told, Gigi, just stop questioning it. That's the way it is. You can change it. I was told so many times you can change it. And here we are now, some 15 years later. Actually, yes, I can change it. I prefer to store my wealth and my energy in a commodity that, yes, there is cycles, but it's definitely not a boom bust like it is in traditional markets where it goes up to infinity and then collapses fully. So yeah, it's interesting how people say, don't question it, but then Bitcoin really gets you to question everything.
It does. And I think one of the things that's really fascinating about Bitcoin is we live in a reality or a place where everything is a variable. Everything is fluctuating. you have different supply and demand dynamics on different goods or services throughout the marketplace. And so everything is in flux. And if you're measuring the value of those goods or services in another moving unit, you can't really accurately solve for things within the marketplace. You can't get an accurate, there's no pure price signal. And so having a fixed unit to be able to measure from provides an immense amount of clarity. And yeah, it definitely changes your perspective a whole lot. Growing up in school, you're taught what to think, not how to think. It's one
Yeah.
of the things that I talk about a bit. It's yeah, and you have a central authority controlling the money supply, and as Breedlove says, money is half of every transaction in the world that we live in today. And if the money is being, meddled with or played with or manipulated, then you can't accurately see what's happening within the marketplace. I
Yeah.
saw a
And
chart on a Swan YouTube video a couple months back. Actually, I was in Prague. I was in my hotel room in Prague when I saw this. They were measuring the value of the S&P index or the S&P 500 in dollars. And if you look at it in dollars, it's a hockey stick up to right. But if you adjust for the amount
purchasing
of,
power.
yeah, if you adjust for M2, so you can adjust somewhat for the money supply increase, what was happening is the S&P is slowly going down in value. So it's creating this
Yep.
optical illusion. I bring this up to people when I'm talking about Bitcoin. I'm like, hey, you understand that your car is going down in value, but you think your house is going up in value. But what you're failing to see is that you're measuring it with a dollar that is decreasing in value so fast that it's creating the optical illusion of the house increasing in dollar value, which it's increasing in dollar value. But it's not increasing in value in real terms. What's happening is it's actually going down in value like the car is. You just can't see it because the currency is not being debased so fast that the car and the house are going down in value.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating how more people, I mean, out of, let's say, the Bitcoin realm, how they don't question that like 40% of all dollars that ever existed were printed in the last 4 years. Like it's
Yeah.
people just like, I don't know, are they either they're too big? I guess the people's lives have become so hard that there is no time to question anything. It's kind of just, how do I get by the next day, the next week? How do I make, ends
Yeah.
meet? Unfortunately, people are in this position that I don't believe that everyone's ignorant or stupid. It's just that they're put into this like little box where they're like a hamster on that wheel running, and there's no distraction out of it. And it's sad because, growing up, I always thought the year of 2020 is going to be, Eric, this year where we have flying saucers and we're like interplanetary species. And next thing I know, we get to 2020 and I've got some surgical mask on my face and I need to send an SMS text to take my dog for a walk to get approval. Like, that's not how I
Crazy.
imagined my future to be. Like, it's
Totally.
crazy. And then I think, at least with COVID, what it gave was people just lost total trust in all their governments. Like, people just don't take the shit that's happening anymore. And the elites, I mean, the people that are kind of pulling the strings, they're slowly losing their control. And I guess that's why we're seeing so much more chaos and the true clown world like coming to surface. And I have a gut feeling all this like natural disaster, especially now it's happening all across US and North Carolina and everything. I don't think that's just random. I think that's like all happening for people to not be questioning stuff, to be totally diverting focus. And if that is the truth, I mean, how disgusting. Like, how many people are losing their lives, are losing everything. Everything is getting wiped out. But I guess that's what they want, right? They want you to be dependent on the government paychecks, to be like fully, under their control. What's your take on that, Eric?
Yeah, well, I think gosh, I think based upon the fact that we have a world full of defective assets or monetary instruments that aren't thermodynamically sound, they're corruptible. So then the incentive is to figure out how to get yourself into a position of power so you have control over either the corruption of the money supply or the system or the information, or at the very least to prevent yourself from being subjected to that corruption. And so, in order to effectively do so, you have to essentially bullshit, a lot of people. And the more that you do that, the harder it is in the world as a citizen or a resident or wherever you're at to figure out what's actually true or not. And so this idea with disinformation I find is very fascinating because, the government and the media is responsible for a lot of misinformation. And the more that they do that, the more people wake up to the fact that they're being lied to, and then they start to question everything. And then you're not sure what's real and what's not, which I think is what's one of the many, many things that's so attractive about Bitcoin is Bitcoin is it's mathematically sound. It's 21 million. 21 million doesn't give a fuck. It's like what comes to mind is I was listening to recently Jeff Booth and George Gammon. They did another debate, which was, or it wasn't so much a debate, it was a conversation. It was a follow-up to a debate that I think Peter McCormick organized. I could be wrong about that, but the conversation went like this. Gammon is like, yeah, well, they'll just corrupt Bitcoin. What they'll do is there'll be another COVID or whatever, and then they'll just print against it. And Jeff Booth is like, yeah, you can continue to debase the currency, but you can't print more Bitcoin. And he's like, Gammon's like, well, they'll corrupt it. And Booth is like, well, how? How are they going to corrupt it? And so what I find really comforting is that you can tether your life force, your excuse me, your stored up surplus life force to this incorruptible protocol that can't be fucked with. And that's really empowering. In so many ways. It's inspiring, it's hope building, it gives you clarity. Like I feel like when I'm measuring the value of things in Bitcoin, you can get an accurate, price of what something is worth. As far as like the volatility and the cycles within Bitcoin's programmatically designed to allocate new coins to the market at a certain duration of time. Maybe that's not the best way of putting it, but with the halving cycles, the decrease in the new issuance of the supply is programmatic. And so when Bitcoin ripped to 67,000, then dropped to 15,000, I was at Pacific Bitcoin last year, and it was the first time that I'd hung out with any other Bitcoiners. I'm a hardcore Bitcoin maximalist running around yelling at the same 20 people for the last many years about Bitcoin, and I didn't know any other Bitcoiners. So I went to my wife. I was like, I got to go to this conference. Like I need to make some friends that I have aligned values with. And I was talking with Matt Cratter, and he said something that, a lot of things, but one thing that really stands out is he goes, when Bitcoin crashed from 67,000 to 15,000, Bitcoin didn't change. The volatility is not within Bitcoin. It's within the liquidity in the outer world, the macro, the traditional financial system is really what's volatile.
Degen traders.
Yes. Well, and everybody's so leveraged in this debt-based system with an inflationary monetary system. You're incentivized to take on debt because you're going to borrow dollars today and pay back cheaper dollars tomorrow, or dollars that are worth less in the future. So if everybody's so levered, and as they continue to need to debase the currency, the amount of equity on average that people have within the marketplace decreases. So as soon as there's any sort of, even if it's a normal issue within the market where there's less supply or less demand than there is supply, then prices are going to come down. If they need to debase faster, or if they got to change the interest rates or whatever, people then have to access whatever is the most liquid to continue to maintain the debt payment or the payments on the debt. And then what they're going to do is they're going to sell down the Bitcoin. So the Bitcoin is going to move from weaker hands to stronger hands, or it's going to move out of the hands of the people that are highly leveraged into the hands that are more fiscally conservative or responsible. And so that's something that I think is really interesting is Bitcoin. I don't believe Bitcoin is volatile. People are like, oh, Bitcoin's so volatile. How do you, what do you do?
Volatile.
How do you, yeah, I'm like, everything else is so volatile. I'm like, how many houses were just built in the neighborhood that you just bought a house in, right? Like that's volatility. Like, houses are being built and stocks are being split and issued. There's going to be new tech companies. If the gold price goes up, a bunch of unprofitable miners are going to be profitable. They're going to go rip up the forest floor and dump gold on the marketplace. You can't effectively audit the supply. I mean, I could go on and on and on about why everything else is so, defective or ineffective as far as, being a store of value.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and
yeah,
just to mark that point, the liquid part of Bitcoin. I mean, I truly believe Bitcoin. It's the most liquid asset that you can buy or sell at any point in time to anyone in the world. I mean, that's also the power of it, right? Because with a house, you're not exactly, if you need money tomorrow, you're not going to sell your $10 million mansion overnight, right? Or if you want to sell your gold or
totally.
whatever, or your stocks, it's Friday closing hours and you need that to make that debt payment, you can't. But Bitcoin, you can sell it at whatever point in time you
Yep.
want. And I guess I totally agree with you, Eric. Like, some people just over leverage themselves, and then they hope for the best, but then the cards don't go their way, and then suddenly you need to sell everything. And then, of course, Bitcoin's going to be the first thing you're going to sell because it's the easiest money to get back. To be
Yeah.
honest, when prices fall, I'm sure you will share this feeling with me, Eric. Like, I love it. Like, it sats on a discount. Like, whenever prices are tanking, uh, I
Yeah.
have a smile on my face. I'm not like, that
Totally.
emoji, like pulling hair out of my head. I'm like, oh wow, like
Yeah.
I can get some, cheaper sats. Like, I'm getting more sats for my dollars, which is good. But most people, they think, oh my God, it's Bitcoin's dead again, or it's going down. And there's one metric I like to tell people that, even today, like, I try to do my deed and get as many people into Bitcoin. I see it as kind of as a Noah's Ark, because I see this flood is fucking coming, and if you're not on the Ark, you're gonna get washed
Yeah.
away. And I try and get people, every day, and I get hit by this response. Oh, but it's 65K. Like, that's so expensive. I go, forget the 65K or 60K or 70K, or even if it's 100K tomorrow. Think about your purchasing power over time. Like, if you look at Bitcoin for the last 10 years, every year, how much that house that we were talking about was worth in dollars. Of course, 10 years ago it was cheaper, but it was a lot more Bitcoin. It was in the thousands of Bitcoin. Today, if you want to buy that same house, yeah, it's 4 times or 5 times the price in dollar values, but in Bitcoin, it's like 100 times, if not more, cheaper. So put that
Yeah.
perspective of getting some Bitcoin and see how everything in your life gets cheaper over time. It's not tomorrow, or having that high time preference or like speculation. How much will Bitcoin pump so I can get, so I can exit 10K higher next month? Forget that. That's fiat mindset, and you don't want none of that. It's all about stacking as much as you can on a regular basis. I'm a true believer in DCA is the best way forward. You're never going to time the market. Um, just buy whatever you have money on hand that you can allocate to your savings. Just buy the Bitcoin, withdraw to cold storage, and live a happy life. And watch, I can guarantee to everyone, in 4 years' time, you're going to be much better off than you were before. So it's a long term game,
Totally.
which is hard for people because everybody doesn't have that patience, and especially the Gen Zs, which make up the biggest percentage of global population. The TikTok generation, like, they cannot wait a year, so it's really hard to get through to them. But at some point they're going to have to understand, or else, as I say, if you're not on the Ark, you better start building your own boat, because the flood is coming, and the more the money prints, the bigger that wave is going to be.
Yeah, for sure. I do think, though, that having a diversified portfolio in trading any asset for another asset is just predicated upon the fact that we didn't have a truly sound,
Yeah.
perfectly engineered asset. And
Mm.
so I think that is, that mindset still permeates the culture very deeply, and most people haven't, listened to the Sailor series multiple times, or spent, many thousand hours just listening to podcasts and understanding all of this. That, and another thing too is that most people aren't really, I'd say that a significant percentage of the population globally don't have the ability to effectively save. So I
Mm.
think that dollar denominated value of Bitcoin, that volatility, is a little bit deterring, due to the fact that most people aren't saving. And I think if most people understood this, if they understood that Bitcoin is indestructible and that it's truly finite, and with some very basic understandings of economics and supply and demand, you have something within the marketplace that's purely monetary. It has no utility value. You can't make jewelry with it. You can't build a house with it. It's not lumber. It's not gold. It's not Apple stocks. So you have this thing that's purely monetary that you can trade for other goods and services, and it is finite. It has a finite supply, a fixed supply at and what 2140, I think
Yeah,
thereabouts, give or
2140,
take.
yeah.
2140 is when the last Bitcoin will be mined. It will be at
The last
21 million.
Satoshi, Eric, to correct you, the last
Yeah,
Satoshi. Do you know that
that's incredible.
the last 35 years, so from year 2105, the last 35 years, all mining around the world, all the mega gigawatt farms will be mining a single Bitcoin for 35
God,
years,
that's so incredible.
which is
Yeah,
like mind blowing. And today, if you look at that, one Bitcoin is 65K. Like, talk about a steal,
totally.
which is insane. But then people,
Yeah,
they're like, oh, but who knows if it's going to be true, and I'm not going to be around. Yeah, you're not going to be around, my friend, but your children and great grandchildren and great great
yeah,
grandchildren will be around. And if you're, I'm stacking at, I know you have kids, I have kids. Like, I'm trying to make my kids and grandkids to basically have the full freedom to pursue any dream they want to do. Like, I don't want them to be in this rat race of what daddy's doing with a double fiat job. Like,
totally.
no, I would love them, because if money would be no issue to me, shit, I'd be shooting this show every day. I wouldn't have one episode come in a week. I would
Yeah,
have a daily show come
totally.
out every day, and I'm working towards that. But it's low time preference, Like,
Yeah,
I'm set. I'm slowly stacking. I think at the current moment in time, and my kids are very young. They're 4 and 2 years old. It's not like they're about to leave the cage and go explore the world. I'm like
yeah,
stacking as hard as I can, because I know that now is the time to go all in, and then in the next couple of years slowly retrace, go full time into this, and from then on we're smooth sailing. But
yeah.
there's a time and a place. But going back to your point, Eric, which is very valid, what you mentioned, that most people unfortunately don't have any savings. And I guess it's this consumerism mindset of, well, in some cases, people really don't get the money, and inflation's really fucking them up. But the other aspect is this getting the latest thing, getting the new iPhone every year, paying $1,200 for a device that it's exactly the same as the one last year. But no, the notch has a little island, or it has an extra button, or whatever gimmick is being sold to you. I think also people don't have the discipline to actually save, because in a big extent people could save, but they just choose not to, because it's all about, like, a family that has 3 cars instead of having one, or even like 2. Like, there's a lot of, or the clutter that you have at home, like how much stuff everybody has. Does everybody need, I'm not saying everybody does, but like, do you need 50 t-shirts? Like, you probably don't. Like, 10 will be more than enough. And it's really hard to deprogram people to start saving when it's all about getting the latest thing. Oh, my neighbor's got that thing, I want to get that thing. But I guess it just goes back to discipline, which is kind of the hardest pill to swallow, self-discipline.
Yeah, but I think in addition to that, so yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. Additionally, I think that when you have a Keynesian economic model where the currency is being debased, you have to increase
Spend.
the yeah, you have to increase the growth within the marketplace. And so if you're
Mm.
going to debase infinitely, you need to have infinite growth to compensate for that. And so, another layer to that is as the currency is debased, the cost of operating your business goes up because there's more monetary units being injected into the marketplace than there is goods and services. So the
Yeah.
increase within the currency is greater than the increase within the goods and services. So what's that doing? What that does is that creates a existential crisis for the producer of a good or service, where they have to continue to issue new goods to get people to buy them. They have to figure out how to keep that revenue up. But we do live in a fundamentally deflationary world, whereas we become more advanced and more technologically savvy, we're producing more for less, which is
Mm.
bringing the value down. It's bringing the cost of things down. But as the currency is debased, the value of things has to go up, especially when it's a debt-based system where you have assets that collateralize the debt. The monetary units are being lent into existence as debt against assets, predominantly real estate and equities, but those aren't fixed supply assets, so they're being debased. So as we
Mm.
become more efficient, we're producing more of these things at a faster rate. And then that means that the debasement required to keep the system solvent increases. So if you're a producer, let's say you're Apple, you can't just make an iPhone, sell a bunch of them, and then they work for like 10, 15 years instead of, everybody buys a new one every 2 years or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because the producer has to continue to increase their revenue stream denominated in dollars because their cost is going up denominated in dollars. So like what you said early on, you're like, yeah, I thought in 2020 we'd have like flying cars and all this technology. And that's a problem, though, because the productivity gains within the marketplace are being siphoned out of the marketplace through the debasement of the currency. And the recipients of those new monetary units are the ones that are effectively taking that surplus and allocating it somewhere else within the marketplace. And so, like in the States, the debasement is to keep the top-heavy government operating and the military. And so you have broken incentives, and it's a system that's not compatible with our reality. We live in a deflationary world, as Jeff Booth says. Free markets are deflationary. You're going to produce more goods and services, and that's going to dilute the value of the existing goods and services. And if you couple that with a debt-based inflationary monetary system, it's two opposing forces. So it doesn't work. That means that the property owning class or the cotillionaires, the recipients of those new monetary units, are winning at the expense of the people who don't own the property, or the people who are using the currency as a store of value. And so if you don't own any assets or any property outside of a currency, you have a real issue because the assets are going up in value because they're debasing the currency against those assets, which is rewarding people for just owning the assets at the expense of people who don't own the assets. And so with the fixed, it's like the Jeff Booth quote, I say this all the time, where you have abundance in money, you create scarcity in everything else. Because the money is shitty. The money is being debased at hyper rate, so you can't store it. If somebody wrote you $100 million check, if you didn't understand Bitcoin, you're going to go to a financial advisor and he's going to say, hey, you're going to have to buy a bunch of stuff. You need to buy a bunch of real estate. You need to buy a bunch of equities. You need a diversified portfolio of stocks, bonds, whatever. And where you have where you have scarcity in money, you create abundance in everything else. If the money is the hardest thing in the marketplace, then the incentive is to hold that and only deploy it for what you immediately need to live. So if the money is harder than the house, why would I want 10 houses? I might want one house. I might want to travel and rent a house for a weekend or whatever, but I don't need to own 10 houses. I'd rather just own the money. So by having scarcity in money, it's going to incentivize people to hold the money, which is going to strengthen the money and not hold all this other stuff that people have been hoarding as to save their economic energy in. So having Bitcoin just inverts that incentive, and it incentivizes people. Like, I live in a rental. Like, I sold my house. I sold everything that I had any value in it that I didn't need, and put it all into Bitcoin. And so that's freeing up goods and service, or goods that people need to use to live a quality life. The fact that BlackRock is buying Bitcoin means that they're not buying as many single family homes, which that's contributing to making houses more affordable. That's a good thing. Bitcoin's the only ethical investment. You'll never stop people from trying to save up a surplus. If that surplus is in the form of other things that people need to exist, then that's not ethical. Every other monetary instrument has second or third order negative effects. And Bitcoin doesn't. It's the only ethical investment. Gold is a shitty monetary instrument. If the gold, like I said, if the gold price goes up, let's say they bring back a gold standard. Peter Schiff gets his fucking dream come true, right? Oh yeah, they're gonna revalue gold to 50 grand an ounce, right? Then that just means that they're just gonna go rip up the forest floor and destroy the ecosystems to dump more gold on the market. So Elon channels his aspirations to get us to Mars, and all of a sudden there's an enormous amount of gold. It's my understanding that when the Spanish started to take over in South America, that they stole so much gold that you actually had hyperinflation in Spain because a bunch of boats full of gold were coming to hit the marketplace in Spain. So yeah, I mean, I think the problems that we have in the world today have compounded And it's all based upon the fact that we didn't have a technological solution so that we could trade fairly. We didn't have a fixed hard money that I don't know. I mean, think about this. Like, we built the civilization that we have today, at least based upon the history that we commonly understand, on the technology of a yellow shiny rock. Like, that's pretty incredible if you think we got here using a yellow shiny rock to trade, right? And so yeah, I'm very hopeful about the future. And I do think Bitcoin, because of the decentralized
nature.
the nature and the way that the network has been designed, it oh, I lost what I was going to say. I don't know, whatever. It'll come back to me if it's important. Yeah.
True. No, I totally agree. And just to add some perspective to it, kind of, it's very hard for the average person to be suddenly switching their mindset from, I need to spend because my money's, devaluing every single day, to just buying this digital internet money called Bitcoin, and I just store it and don't use it. Like, it's going to lose value. Like, it's very hard to decouple, rewire your brain to, holding something instead of, as you said, spending. Because I guess most people do understand, holy shit, like, life is getting more expensive. So let me buy this stuff today because tomorrow it's going to be more expensive. But that's not what you should be doing. And most of the stuff, also another point that you brought up, which was really good, Eric, like, things are not manufactured anymore to last, a decade, 2 decades. It's not like our grandparents' washing machine or the fridge that, they bought in the 60s and 70s, and that thing's still going hard. Today, no matter what you buy, even if it's a little bit more expensive, like, it'll last you maybe an extra year or two. Like, shit just breaks. And you're constantly on this, consumerism cycle of buying new stuff. And then we, the ordinary people that have no say in the quality of products that are being designed and sold to us, we need to pay it off with different, greenhouse taxes, because we're making the world, we're polluting the world. I was, until recent, living in Europe. They replaced all plastic straws and you're drinking paper straws, so we can save the world. But actually, the guys that are making the world worse, and not just the gold miners, which are like ripping out the Amazon and forests all across the world to mine a shiny rock. Like, this whole consumerism complex, or the biggest scam that's been around for the last 5 years, is electric car shenanigans, where like lithium iron farms are like so bad for our climate and are destroying our ozone layers. But no, like, you need to go have an electric car. And I don't know, just side note, I think electric cars in 10 years it's going to be like a very minor, like, collector's thing. I think we're so hard going to go back to the big V8s and dinosaur juice fueled petrol cars. Because I think that's also another scam that we're being sold, that, we're running out of oil. Like, I can't verify that. Just the same way, like, how much gold or like diamonds, what the beer monopoly has done, like, this little shiny crystal is worth X amount because one company said, and they built this whole shenanigan of, the woman's best friend, and, every engagement ring should be a diamond, but they're getting whacked by lab grown diamonds. So it's like, we're seeing so many like shifts in the way that our reality has been operating for the last 50, 100 years. And then Bitcoin just comes in as this wrecking ball and says, guys, we got to start fresh. And I think the sooner, nation states start adopting Bitcoin, they will see a huge influx of great minds just magnetized to that country. And from that, so many great things will happen. And maybe that's a transition to a more positive side, because we talked about some doom and gloom here with you, Eric. But I guess that's the way everyday life is to most people. But I wanted to bring up El Salvador, which, as we got chatting off the record, you visited already a couple of times this year, and you're going soon for an extended period of time. How has El Salvador, which to some listeners who are just brand new to Bitcoin, El Salvador is a little country in South America that adopted Bitcoin as legal tender 3 years now, I believe it is, right, Eric?
Yep.
It's already 3 years. And the change that they've seen in the country is beyond anything you can explain. I'm yet to go experience it myself, but Eric, I want to hear and you sharing with our audience, how's El Salvador been since, choosing to have Bitcoin as legal tender? How's the vibes there?
The vibes are quite amazing, honestly. In the States, I talk with a lot of people. I mean, and everywhere I've traveled outside of El Salvador, there seems to be a common theme where people are concerned about how bad it's going to get. How bad is it going to get in the States? How bad is it going to get in Europe? In El Salvador, it's the exact opposite. It's like, how good is it going to get here? And the way I look at what Bukele did is he he made a few major changes in the way the government was operating. He downsized the government and he got rid of essentially violation of property rights on behalf of the government and the gangs. So the citizens of El Salvador were having, they're being extorted through corruption on the streets and corruption in the government.
Both sides.
They're getting hit from both sides. And so by eliminating that, he's put into effect policies and ideologies, really, to protect people's property rights, to give them higher level of property rights. And you can see that everywhere you look within the country, people are happy. They get to keep what they produce, or at least a larger percentage. And it creates also a more consensual exchange with the government. Like you're giving up, like we grow up and we're taught to believe that we're like contributing into the societal pot. We're going to pay taxes, and then the government, these elected individuals who we all chose, who are supposed to be smart and ethical people, are going to then use their intellect and their power and their connections or whatever to figure out how to most effectively allocate that capital and like make our society good, right? And that's been heavily corrupted, and it doesn't seem to necessarily be the case in most places in the world. And El Salvador has a lot of that going for it. I think that the people there are very, dude, the approval rating that Bukele has is absolutely incredible. He's one of the most loved and approved leaders in the world. But, I've also been thinking a lot about like kind of what happened in the States, and I don't necessarily know that Trump is some great savior or whatever, but I think Trump did do some things that were good for the country. And in his 4 years, some things got a lot better in the United States. Within no time, a new leader got elected and undid all of that. And so I've thought a lot about like what happens if Bukele has, some political opposition that has exact opposite, beliefs or ideologies, and gets in and just unwinds all of this. And considering moving, I'm considering moving there. I like it so much. It's quite a fun place to be. I've thought a lot about that. Like what happens when the next guy gets in office? And I think that the fact that, and I don't know, being a Bitcoin maximalist, maybe I'm struggling to see outside of the implications of Bitcoin. But I think that what El Salvador is doing is so effectively tethered to the incorruptible nature of Bitcoin that it has a high probability of lasting. If you're going to allow people to transact in Bitcoin tax-free, and you're going to take on a Bitcoin treasury strategy, then you're going to mine Bitcoin, then you're also incentivizing other entrepreneurs and capital people with high levels of ingenuity to come to that area, to innovate, to build, to create, whatever. The movement that he's building has so much momentum behind it. And I think that Bukele, or any individual, that's just any person, has some level of corruptibility, I would say. And so let's say Bukele is an incorruptible individual. Well, he's not going to be the leader of the country forever, right? But I think that he's effectively implementing policy or change within the country that'll stick because it's built on an incorruptible protocol. And that actually brings to mind what I was going to say that I forgot there, is the fact that Bitcoin is incorruptible, and that it's this inverse in the incentive structure, and the incentive is to now hold the money and not these other assets. And you can't get Bitcoin. You have no one has an unfair advantage over anybody else within the Bitcoin marketplace or the Bitcoin network. If you want Bitcoin, you have to get somebody else who has it to give it to you in trade for a good or a service. or you have to mine it. You have to have a lot of electricity. And so that's imposing a new rule set on our civilization. It's forcing cooperation. The incentive is changed. Like, if El Salvador had a gold standard, let's say they had some just mega gold deposits, you have this physical gold, there would be other sociopathic scumbag leaders that would be thinking to themselves, like, how do I get over
How do I
there
get
and
it?
kill a bunch of people and steal all their gold, right? And so if you want El Salvador's Bitcoin, you need to offer up something that El Salvador wants, or you need to go and mine some Bitcoin. And so, yeah, it's forcing cooperation, and its incorruptible nature is the implications of that, I think, are so profound that there's like, dude, there's just thousands of people having conversations across the planet right now, just like you and I, talking about, like, wait a second, hold on, this changes everything. What does this mean? It's like it's growing a whole movement. It's like there's a religious, ideological element to this. So it's much more than money. And we live on a planet that has a finite amount of resources. And so you need to trade with something that is also finite. You can't have an infinite currency or money supply and trade effectively in a sustainable way in a realm with a finite amount of resources. So that's a little bit of a tangent, but yeah, I think El Salvador has got something going that I think has a high probability of lasting because it's infused with Bitcoin, which is incorruptible. And so and also there's what's taking place is so the opposite of what has been happening there for so long that the people have been liberated in like one of the highest ways. Like I don't think they're going to give that up. So whoever Bukele wants, endorses as far as the next president will have a lot of support from the people. Yeah, and there's the implications of being able to get paid in Bitcoin or spend Bitcoin without a taxable event is also, I think, quite profound, and that's gonna be a big deal in the long term there for sure.
Well, that's a strong ideology that Bitcoiners, who believe that taxation is absolute theft. It's something that goes in line with Bitcoiners' values, and even if there is a certain tax in the future, as long as it's something reasonable, like 5-10%, I don't think that's a problem. Like I'd happily contribute that to a government that I know is doing the right thing. But what you see in Europe, where you're being taxed 50-60% from all taxes, we're talking, the income tax, capital gains tax, your VAT, all those shenanigans. It's just crazy. And at the end of the day, the government's basically slowly suffocating you. It's not a place you want to be now. But going back to Bukele, I also believe that, what he's done, it should be a prime example to a lot of other nations, especially nations that are going through a hard time that could do that tomorrow, but they don't. And I thought, to be honest, Eric, a lot of other countries would already be adopting a strategy. Now, why they're not, I don't know. Maybe they realize that with this, Bukele's playbook, their corruption is out the window, and these people fight to get into office to have that access to their own corruption for their span of 3-4 years, whatever they are. But I think people just should have a long-term vision, and I think what Bukele is doing and his long-term vision for the country is unparalleled to other, even some first world countries, which are actually going into worse than a crisis. It's like when Rome fell, it took like 50 years for people to actually realize that Rome is crashing. It doesn't happen overnight, and that's what I truly believe we're seeing in the first world countries. We're past the point of recovery. It's just downhill from here. It's just every year the shit's coming to the surface, and it's getting harder to get by, and people are looking for a way out. And Bukele is fairly young, right? Like, I think he could run, of course, not for forever. He's not immortal, but like, if he keeps doing his thing for the next decade, I think the infrastructure and everything he's going to build there, as you said, Eric, it's going to be super hard for the next leader to come in and just full rewind everything, because this collaboration aspect, which I think is super important, because that's, once again, another thing that's total opposite to the legacy markets, where it's all about competition. Like, this is my product, this is my IP, this is all mine. Whereas in Bitcoin, we're all for collaborating and helping each other, because if I help another fellow Bitcoiner, we're all winning. We're all building this brave new world together. and I think it's a very powerful thing. And the last thing I want to mention in this is, having positive and warm and loving interactions with people, where unfortunately today, no matter what religion you're from, or what class you're in, most people don't even speak to their neighbors, let alone get together at parks, at beaches, and do things together. It's all like everybody lives in their own little bubble, and it's just, how do I make this bubble survive for as long as I can? And that's just not a healthy way to be in. And then even further, raising kids in such an environment, uh holy shit, like it builds them up for being and having very miserable lives, which is the last thing I want my kids. I want my kids to be full of happiness, love, and encourage collaboration and working with other people, instead of no, leave those people, that they might rob you, they might, I don't know, rape you or whatnot. It's crazy. Like, we should not be living in that world.
Yeah, I think that when people's basic needs are met and they can
Maslow's hierarchy pyramid, right?
Yeah, I feel like their default is to be compassionate and kind to other people. And so I feel like we have, in some sense, a fiat induced like shittiness that we like impose upon each other. And I think that that's just built on like, the fact that things are artificially getting more expensive. They're getting more expensive in fiat, but in real terms, there were more abundance. And so we shouldn't have as much scarcity and struggle within our civilization as we do. And that's that bifurcation of our society where you have the have-nots and the have-yachts. And like the people who are on the top are getting extremely wealthy at the expense of essentially everybody else. And that's a dynamic that wouldn't be taking place. And I don't think it's going to take place because of the fact that Bitcoin is here. I don't think Bitcoin's going away. I think it's indestructible. I think that the incentive vortex is so powerful that it's going to pull everybody into it. And the thing that I find so beautiful about Bitcoin is you have a small percentage of the populace that is sociopathic, and they'll do whatever the fuck to get what they want, regardless of what negative effects that has on other people. And now with Bitcoin, the incentive is to get the Bitcoin. It's the hardest asset within the marketplace. And hoarding Bitcoin is ethical. And so you're going to, I think we're going to see this over the next, I don't even know, it could be 10, 20, 50 years. Everybody is going to figure this out in time.
Yeah.
Because everybody needs to have an effective way at the lowest amount of energy expenditure to figure out how to store up their surplus. You have to have a surplus. Otherwise, you can't survive. Like as Sailor says, if you're a diabetic and you can't store fat, you can't go without food, you'll die. If you can't save money, you can't hedge yourself against future uncertainty or the future certainty that someday you're not going to be able to work, right? And something else that you discussed too, as far as like, I don't know, the shittification of everything and the decreasing in quality. Refrigerators used to last 20, 30 years. Now they seem to break every 5 or 10 years, right? It's planned obsolescence. A producer can't make a product once and stay in business because they don't have, well, you can now with Bitcoin, but pre-Bitcoin, you couldn't effectively save your surplus. So if you go to the marketplace and you solve a problem and you earn a surplus, and if you can put that surplus into an effective asset that's thermodynamically sound, then you can proceed forward and live off the benefits of doing something once. Like Apple doesn't need to make a new iPhone every single year. They could make one that's really badass and then go back to the drawing board and really innovate heavily and then come out with a new one when there's actual innovation. So fiat is incentivizing, having a Keynesian economic model is incentivizing producers and really everybody within the marketplace to continue to figure out how to extract from the marketplace to stay, I don't know, solvent or to continue to maintain.
Make the shareholders happy with their quarter's earnings.
Yeah. And so, yeah, Bitcoin just flips all that on its head. You know, it's like if you could go to the marketplace, solve a problem. If there's a large problem that's like, a lot of people have, you're going to make a lot of money if you can solve that problem. If there's a lot of market demand and there's not enough supply, the free market will bid the price up. And at some point, the supply will increase relative to the demand and the margins will decrease. If you could go in and do something for 5 or 10 years, earn a surplus, put that surplus in an asset that's appreciating relative to the goods and services that you're going to exchange it for, you can then be done. Like what we're taught to believe the way the world works growing up is possible with Bitcoin. You could work hard and save, and then when you have enough, you could retire. But in fiat, you have to become an interest rate arbitrage specialist and a little mini hedge fund manager and manage your portfolio of all of these things that really are not monetary. They're not purely monetary instruments. They're monetized stuff. And then you have to figure out, it's like people say, oh, I've heard people say this, like, oh, it's really hard just managing all this money. Well, no, you're not managing money. You're managing stuff. When people are like, oh, so-and-so, Bill Gates and, Jeff Bezos, they have so much money. No, they don't. They have a bunch of stuff. They have a bunch of mansions and they got a bunch of stock in companies. Like, why is equity in companies and houses being treated as money? Because we didn't have we didn't have a money. The other thing Matt Cratter said at Pacific Bitcoin last year blew my mind, and it's just so real. Bitcoin is the first money humanity's ever had. We've had things that we've used as money. Fly in here. We've had things that we've used as money, but we didn't actually have an engineered money. We had a yellow shiny rock. We had political currency units issued by nation states that are corruptible. And so, yeah, now the fact that we have a money.
Or even going back, before gold, we used to exchange like shells and rocks. There was no actual, as you said it, money.
Yeah. Now we have a money. We have a money and we can accurately measure the value of things in this money that's fixed. It's engineered, it's perfectly engineered. The incentive is to hold the money. That's going to free up all of this hoarding of other things that people need to exist. It's going to demonetize. Like, why are these? It's so interesting. Like Jeff Booth said this in his keynote in Madeira. He's like, people complain. I forget how he said it, but essentially he said, like, we complain about these central, too big to fail entities, the Googles, the Amazons, the Facebooks, but we save our money in equities in these companies. We are giving them our power, and then we're complaining about how powerful they are. Well, if you have a problem with the world, if there's anything that you see that's unjust taking place in the world, then put your economic energy, sell all your dollar derivatives, sell all your garbage defective assets, if you could even call them that. I don't even think they're assets. They're just stuff. And put your money into Bitcoin. That's the most effective way to implement change in the world. Vote with your economic energy, your life force. We live in an energy-based universe. You exert energy and you get things in return, right? And so whatever that surplus is being stored in, there's all sorts of different flavors of counterparty risk. And I would argue that Bitcoin has no counterparty risk. It's the only thing that's free of counterparty risk. And so, that's the most effective thing that you can do to implement change in the world is to stack sat.
And it seems like such a simple answer, right? Just stack sats and live a humble, happy life, and people are always overcomplicating. How do I beat the market? Like, what's the next stock to buy, or in the crypto shit casino, what's the next meme coin to buy? Like, forget all of that. You don't need that stress, and in most cases, you're just gonna get fucked over. You're not gonna win nothing. You're just gonna lose the little bit of money that you had. So by eradicating all of that and going back to what you said, which I totally agree, Eric, like these ultra net worth high individuals with their billions of dollars on paper because they don't have it in cash sitting at home, those guys are doing everything to get more, and the greed is so strong to have that dick measuring contest next year at the Monaco Yacht Show. I want to have the biggest yacht, but at the end of the day, it doesn't bring them any happiness. Like, that's the other thing with Bitcoin. It really makes you a happier person. The more you stack, the more time you spend learning about Bitcoin, you change your way of living. Like, what, as you said, Eric, what you dedicate your energy to. if you don't like, seeing what's going on TV, instead of complaining about it, just switch it off. Don't put it on. If you don't like what's
Yeah.
happening on X, don't go on X. Delete your account. Just opt out. Like, the way you choose your life is with the decisions you make and the actions you take. And with Bitcoin, I think, and this whole healthy living, like, how many people go down the path of exercising better, watching what they, ingest into their bodies, may that be drugs or nutrition or whatever it is. Like, it really, makes you into a better person. And then let alone the communication that you have with other people, because you realize that with Bitcoin, like, how you treat other people is how you get treated back. And in the old system, it's all about forget other people. It's just me against everyone else. So I just can't, explain that Bitcoin changes you on so many levels, that, it starts with the money. And most of us, and I'm sure, well, you as well, Eric, kind of your story, from what I take it, you came to Bitcoin because of money. Like, how does this money game work? And then you're like, holy shit, there's much more to than just money in here. And then you
Yep.
never go back. And I think that's really powerful. And that's like the timing of it, how Satoshi released this. And, the first Genesis block that was mined on 3rd of January 2009, talk about like hitting on the nail. And then this 4-year halving cycle is another phenomena, because if there would be no halvings, then it's kind of, how would the distribution work? And I don't know, I don't think Bitcoin wouldn't be what it is today without it. Like, I think the halving aspect, and the fact that most Bitcoin, even as the time of this recording in the year of 2024, Bitcoin's been around for 15 years, and over 92% of all Bitcoin that's ever going to exist has already been mined. So like, masses of Bitcoin have been essentially pumped and dumped out, and how much of it got lost forever. So that even shrinks the supply further. So it's not even 21 million.
Yeah.
21 is on paper, but like, there's
Totally.
been so many numerous guests that were mining, Bitcoin. I had actually the last 2 weeks, I had Derek Ross on, and he said how he used to mine on his gaming laptop. And yeah, like, there's been so many, thousands of Bitcoins, millions of Bitcoins that were just lost forever. So that then brings it down even
Totally.
further. And then we have the
Yep.
BlackRocks, we have the Salvadors, we have, of course, MicroStrategy, and all future, companies that are going to be buying it, and they're not going to be speculating, dumping it. They're just going to be hoarding it. So when people tell me, "Oh, when's the bull market coming?" Like, what? It's up October, but the price is going down,
Started
right?
15 years ago.
Correct. I'm like, well, zoom out. Yeah, look where we were, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. You are in the bull market. The bull market never stops, But when you like zoom
Totally.
in, like the mega traders, when they're trading the 1 minute candle, and they're like, oh my god, it's going down. No, just zoom out. Look at the 1 year candle, and the price
Yeah.
is just going one way. It's going up. So the sooner you get in, the better. And even now, people, I highly advise, whatever you can, just go in, even if Bitcoin, has a 20% dump. Well, you can't win them all, but if you're long, like, if you have a long-term vision for it, and if it's your pension fund, then there's nothing better you can do than buy it. And I think real estate also is such a big bubble that's going to explode at some point. Just how the stock market's going to pop. I think the dot-com bubble that happened some 20, 23 odd years ago, I think this next like stock market bubble, whenever it happens, it's going to be something else. And real estate should go back to what it was originally made for housing people, giving you a need that you need. Everybody needs a roof on their house. Doesn't matter if you're Michael
Yeah.
Sater or you're whoever, an average pleb on the street. Everybody needs a house, Then how big of a house, how fancy it is, that's another thing. But housing should be to keep people safe, and have somewhere to raise your kids, not a speculative investment and like propping up. It's just insane. And Gen Zs today can't own anything. And if anything, it's best to sell everything, like, do your own research. But like what Eric's done by selling everything and going full into Bitcoin, I personally think that's the best thing you could have done. And I did the similar thing earlier in the year. I left Europe and I sold pretty much everything. I didn't have like my own housing. I do have a commercial real estate, and that's kind of my side cash cow, because like my day jobs are as volatile as the economy is. So they're here today. God
Mm-hmm.
knows if they're there tomorrow. But like, the commercial rent still comes in, and my that property is in a good location, which I believe for the foreseeable future, there will be always demand for it. So that's a different game. But yeah, everything else, like everything was just sold, put into Bitcoin, and I couldn't feel more liberated, you know. And today I live in very controversial country of Russia, but my wife's from here, and to me personally, like,
Mhm.
living standards are 3 times cheaper.
Yeah.
Everything, produce and everything, is 3 times better. Like, GMO is banned here. There's no a lot of things that are promoted in the Western world, and
Yeah.
like my nursery education, everything's free, medical, everything's free, and it's actually good. So for now, like, I love it, but I'm not planning anytime soon to buy anything, because if life changes tomorrow, we can just pack up. My our cold storage it's always
Totally.
ready in the backpack, and I can go wherever I want. And same, I guess, with you, Eric. If you wish to move to El Salvador in the near future, and then you realize, well, actually, I don't really like it here, you can just pack up and go. There is no, oh, I need to sell the house, I need to sell the business, I need to sell all this junk, which is actually, it's like an anchor holding you down to a certain place.
Totally.
Not
Yep.
owning anything is the most freest thing, and the most abundant you can be, which is kind of on the country where everybody sells you the dream. Oh, you should have a big house and a big, chunky car outside. And that's not what life is all about. Life is being free to do what you want at any point in time, and Bitcoin gives you that finally.
Yeah. Gives you the most optionality. Yeah, and when people, are like, "Oh, it's 60 grand, it's expensive." It's, probabilistically speaking, going to appreciate relative to goods and services at a faster rate than everything else forever. So you buy
Mm,
it forever, it doesn't matter what the price is.
true.
Doesn't matter. It's like, and it's infinitely divisible. You can subdivide it further. If we ended up in a world where half the Bitcoin got lost and a cup of coffee is a fraction of a Satoshi, they'll just, with a backwards compatible software update, just make it more divisible. So,
True.
and I do think it's hard for people to understand. I mean, all of us in the community have spent an immense amount of time learning and researching, and like, dude, there's just been so many occasions where, like, I've literally listened to something, paused it, and had to, like,
Mm,
wait a second and really think about that. Why are new neurological pathways, see things differently, and then, like, okay, integrate that. Like, listening to the Jeff Booth series that Breedlove did a couple of years ago when that first hit, like, dude, and like Jason Lowry's thesis, listening to the
mm.
Lowry series on Breedlove, like, it's like, oh my gosh, like, these are such interesting concepts that are seemingly indisputable, and they're an entirely new perspective on things. And so, yeah, it's changes everything. I really think it quite literally changes a lot of things about how our world operates, for
It,
sure.
it's like that ayahuasca trip, right? Like, I personally haven't done it, but I know some people that have done ayahuasca. Like, they never see the world ever the same again. And I don't know if it's true, but
Yeah.
they say, like, with ecstasy and some hard drugs, when you take it, your
Yeah.
brain is rewired and it's never the same again. Like, things are different. I'm not saying they're for the better, but with Bitcoin, like,
Yeah.
everything is not the same and it's for the best. Like, there's no
Yeah.
better cure to unplugging yourself from, as quote unquote, the matrix, than going down the orange rabbit hole. And that's hence why I'm doing this podcast, because I really want to share to as many people as possible that there is no oh, that guy was lucky, he heard about it in 2010, 11. Like, no, like, you can be lucky today in 2024 by
Yep.
starting to buy your first bag of sats, and just constantly, as Eric says, keep buying it no matter what the price is. Like, I'm sure when Bitcoin hits $1 million, we're suddenly not going to be like, oh, that's it, I'm not stacking anymore, I've got enough. No, like, you'll always be
Yeah.
stacking. And when it's
And
10
sell it
million,
for
you'll
what?
still be
What do
stacking.
you if it goes to $10 million, what are you gonna sell it for? Maybe something you
True,
want, like a house to live
true,
in, but, like,
true.
it's the final trade. Like,
Yeah.
it's the last trade. It's the last thing that you buy to save in, and then
Mm.
if you need to access that savings, then you trade the Bitcoin for something that you want. Pretty
Yeah.
straightforward.
Yeah.
It's the simple strategy is the winning strategy now. It really is.
And the most important thing, which I think kind of concludes it, is being patient, right? Which goes back to the Gen Zs, which I said they have no patience, but that's something you need to train, and going back to discipline as well. Just be patient with things, like, have a long outlook on life, and don't just burn through everything. And maybe you don't want that brand new car today. Wait a few years, because things on the
Yeah,
Bitcoin standard just do get cheaper, and in the future you can, if you really want to buy your dream house and want to get off the rent ladder, I don't disagree. Like, we're all different, and if that's your goal, go for it. But like, just think about it. Maybe it's not the wisest selling a Bitcoin or two today, where if you wait for the next 5-10 years, you can buy a house maybe for 5 million sats instead of 100 million sats.
totally.
So it's just having a long-term game. And the last thing I want to kind of leave especially the new listeners, because I try to attract fresh people that are new to Bitcoin. It's this, that Bitcoin is subdivided to 100 million units, which is, when I tell that to the average person, you see their pupils, they just like, they expanded. Like, what do you mean 100 million? Because everybody's used to 100 units, like $1, 100 cents. But then you're like,
Totally.
100 million. It's like, oh my God. It's like, so that means I don't need
Yeah.
to buy a whole Bitcoin. Like, how many people, and I'm sure
Yep.
you share this, Eric, they're like, so I don't have to buy a full Bitcoin. No, you can buy like $50 worth of Bitcoin and just watch
Yep.
that, gain purchasing power. So I guess the lesson is just start stacking as early as possible, and never look back. But I'll switch that to you. That's kind of the closing question that I do to all guests. What is one or two piece of advice that you would leave to newcomers that are getting started on their Bitcoin journey today? Even though there's been shitloads of alpha already dropped from Eric on this episode, but like, one kind of closing statement that you would share with newcomers.
To realize that if you measure the value of the things that you want in life in currency, you're measuring the value of something which is a variable, which can increase or decrease in supply, in another variable that could increase in supply. It actually is designed to increase in supply. So you're not getting an accurate price signal there. And also, things are only getting more expensive in the world denominated in fiat. Things are actually getting cheaper if you adjust for the value and what the amount of monetary units within the system are, or if you measure the value of what you want in Bitcoin. Things are getting cheaper. That, and then we have a unit bias. People want to they want one of something, and they don't realize that like you can actually get 50,000 sats. And so when they think about Bitcoin, I can't get a whole Bitcoin because Bitcoin is so expensive. Well, it's only expensive relative to what it was in the past. And it's subdividable, which the $600,000 house that somebody wants isn't subdividable. And so Bitcoin will appreciate at a faster rate than everything forever, as long as it stays decentralized and secure. And as far as like time preference, which is commonly discussed within the Bitcoin community, if your future looks worse than the present, then you're incentivized to figure out how to capitalize on the present and make the present moment the best it could be. Like, if you're going to die tomorrow, you're going to YOLO into whatever life experience you could have today. But if your future looks better, then you're incentivized to be healthier, to be prudent. Like, Bitcoin incentivizes prudence. Like, it incentivizes you to be fiscally responsible, to buy and take only what you need, and save what surplus you have into the future. And so Bitcoin really flips so many things in our world completely upside down. And so I would just say to somebody who's not that doesn't understand Bitcoin at this point, that's a pre-coiner, because I think there are no coiners, there are only pre-coiners. Yeah, just do the research, start to think about it. Like, this isn't something where like you have this whole growing community globally of people that bought Bitcoin early that are just running around rich, that are happy. It's the implications of this discovery, this technology built on the discovery of scarcity, are so profound. It's you could spend endless years talking and thinking about it. Like, I don't even listen to music anymore. There's too much good conversation taking place. There's too much stuff happening. Like, I don't have time to listen to music. Like, there's Bitcoin stuff happening in the world. And another thing I will say, and maybe I'll leave it at this: energy flows where attention goes. So if you have a problem with Clown World, but you're like fixated on it and you're watching the mainstream media, or you're watching, I don't know, like all the Alex Joneses of the world just yelling at Clown World all day, you're really strengthening it because you're putting energy into it. So if you want to affect change in the world, focus on the things that feel good. And yeah, you know, and start learning about Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is having scarcity. It's the most scarce thing in the marketplace. And as a result of that, the incentive is to have that and not have the less scarce things unless you need them for your immediate, you know, existence. Like I'm not going to, like, there's a Keynesian lie, and the Keynesian lie is that if you don't have an inflationary monetary system, that the velocity in money, the amount of times money changes hands, will decrease to the point where the economy will collapse, right? People will not, they're not incentivized to spend their money if the money is not losing its purchasing power. Well, that is absolutely preposterous. Like, I'm not going to forego eating a meal because my money is increasing in purchasing power. Like, that's crazy. Like, I'll always deploy capital to get what I need to exist, but I won't deploy capital to hoard things that other people need to exist because they have value, and I'm going to use those things to store my value. Why would I do that when I have the hardest asset in the marketplace, which is the money now, and I can just hold on to that and deploy it when I need something? So that's going to free up all of these resources, and it's going to allow the productivity gains and the technological advancements that we have taking place in the world flow to everybody who's using that network. Bitcoin is a monetary network. It's a free and open network that anybody and everybody can use. I suppose that maybe some people live in jurisdictions like North Korea where they can't access the exchanges or something, but I think that
peer-to-peer is still there. I'm sure people in North Korea exchange Bitcoin peer-to-peer. 100%.
And Bitcoin will outlast any sociopathic dictator. I fucking think that's with the highest level of probability that's going to happen. Yeah, and so it's a free and open source protocol, and what Bitcoin is doing is it's measuring the things that we want in the world accurately, and what is really happening is stuff is getting less expensive. It's getting more expensive if you look at it through the lens of fiat, but things are getting less expensive if you look at them through the lens of Bitcoin, or if you measure their value with a fixed unit. So yeah, the world is getting better. It just depends on where your focus is. And so things are getting worse in the fiat paradigm and clown world, but things are getting better if you live on a Bitcoin standard and you're paying attention to what's happening to Bitcoin. And I think that a bunch of corrupted, sociopathic, diabolical, evil overlords will continue to implement their scumbaggery and try to do the things that they've done to effectively corrupt systems in the past, but they will run to an impermeable wall of truth, and that is Bitcoin. Bitcoin changes you because you cannot change Bitcoin. It inverts the incentive structure. So
very true. It's that's an amazing note to end it on. You don't change Bitcoin, Bitcoin changes you. And just to add to it, what you mentioned there, I fully agree with you, Eric, that I think that's why we have this fight on censorship across social platforms, and free speech is getting killed off, because they're realizing, like, holy shit, like the lie is not working anymore. The truth is coming out, and the more that Bitcoin moves forward, that lie is just going to be more visible to everyone. So I guess the conclusion of your advice is, as my good friend Sovereign Origin says, stack sats, stack time. The more sats you have, the more time you have to enjoy with your family and what you really love, and leave the old corrupt world behind. Eric, where can we send our listeners who would love to follow your journey online, or perhaps get in touch? What would be the best place?
I'm on X. It's Eric, ERIC V Stacks. Eric V Stacks. Yeah.
Okay. And Nostr? No Nostr usage at the moment?
I am on Nostr, and my NPub is on in my bio on X.
Okay. In the show notes. We don't expect anyone to remember their NPubs. But Eric, once again, thanks so much, man, for taking the time to jump on. This has been super fun. I would love to have you back, as I share the open invitation with all the guests. Our Bitcoin journeys are always evolving, and Bitcoin is always changing the world. As you said, it's a constant current. Everything is changing. So as we progress in our Bitcoin journeys, we'd love to have you back for a follow-up chat. And yeah,
Sounds
until
good.
then, wishing you and the family all the best. My friend, I hope to see you around on this small globe we call Earth. It won't be in
Yes.
El Salvador just yet. For sure, I'll see you in Prague next summer, but perhaps we'll see each other somewhere else. And yeah, and until next time, keep smashing it.
Yeah, man. Thank you. You too.